Okay, this is a video about a second video about circular references. It's about VBA. Excuse me. Got that wrong already. Simone told me also if you have any tutorials on the basics of VBA coding, I would appreciate that. Now I probably have some others, but I'm going to show you a little thing my friend Pascal and I made, and now I got to pause. Okay, and now Pascal told me if I have a circular reference, like this is a circular reference, A times A1 times A1, and it doesn't show up as a circular reference. Well, I don't know how you get the blue lines, and then we have blue lines for this. I said 135 is this E15 times 0.09, but E15 is a sum, and that includes 135. So there's a problem. And then this one has a circular reference as well. I guess I have to press a number, and then it kind of doesn't show up. And then I guess if I would, and he said, okay, I want to show them all in a sheet. Now we're going to make a VBA code to do this, and we're going to use some principles of sheets, rows, workbooks. Sheets, rows, workbooks. We're going to use some for next loop, which is kind of a follow-up to the last one, and some issues about how to show, when I, okay, here's how I do it. Excuse me. If I put the number, not the name, the number of the starting sheet that I want to check, that's sheet number 3. And then I want to go from sheet number 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know if there's a 6 or a 7. Let's put 6. Do you want comments? Let's put yes. And then what it does is it goes through and puts a little comment on each circular reference, and it puts a little color on each circular reference, and it goes around all of the sheets. So there are for loops that go around, and then it takes and puts all these sheet names here. And you might think, oh, this is too hard. Oh, we can't do this. It's not that hard. And I'll show you kind of how it works. Now, I'm going to press Alt and F11, and we get into the sheet. Now, here's what I have. I first have to admit that I stole something. I went to the internet and I said, how in the hell did you do this? And there was some man who was really nice who put this code up there, and it says set source. So he said, okay, let's put a range name, and he called this source a range, and then he has a source sheet. Well, that's not so hard. And a destination sheet, and then he says for each item in source. Instead of using a for next loop, it's a fancier thing. And then he says, oh, if left of item equals item dot formula is this, and so he's going around the items. It's not that hard, but it's a pain. I'm going to work through what I suggest doing. So I stole his first, and the biggest thing here was, if this is the real thing that I didn't know how to do, of course, if the intersect of the range and its own precedence, if those things intersect, if those things are the same, then it's a circular reference. Pretty cool. Thank you, whoever did that. Okay, so here's what I'm going to start by talking about. And I think I do. Yes, I put some comments in here. Excuse me for not getting some stuff out. Now, here, let me just start at the very beginning. I'm going to tell you bad ways to do things and simple ways to do things. And you could put option explicit here. Now, if you do that, every time you name a variable, every single time you name a variable, you're going to have to put a little dimension statement. This is dimension. And you say cell string 1 is called a string. And then you're going to have to put start sheet and end sheet. Every single variable in the whole thing will have to be defined. Let's not do that. That's way too lazy. I mean, that's way too hard. I want to be a lot lazier. Now, where did I put this? Okay, here's what I did. The whole thing starts with message box. I'm going to put this thing where um, I put right at the beginning, do you want to put those comments in? Now that's a message box. What we could do is just make a regular old message box. So let me make a better introduction. There's an input box and a message box. These are two very simple kind of things to do, and they can be very effective. A message box in its simplest way just shows you this program finds circular references and lists them on a sheet. Okay, that's just a regular one. You notice there's no equal sign here. And if you press F5 now, it just puts this out. Now this is very, very effective for let me just do 3 to 3. This is very effective for it's very effective if you want to figure out what's going on, okay? But you can do another kind of message box, and this is a message box. I'm going to put comment question. And this is that's a variable, and I didn't define this variable anywhere. And if you want a little yes or no thing in the message box, then you can put these little things here, and right afterwards. So you put a comma after you put a bracket around the message box, and then you can go and there's one down here I think that says. All right. And it happens to be that 6 is yes and 7 is no. I had no idea. I had to put a little message box here to find this. And I put and then it will tell me what's yes and what's no. And then if I'm just working on this, I can just put an exit sub here, and then it will tell me. So here's the first one. Do you want it? Yes, no, or cancel. If I put yes, it gives me number 6. So that's how you use a message box. And then if I would do the same thing, I'm pressing F5, or I can run it with this thing. If I would put cancel, it would give me number 2. If I press no, it gives me number 7. How you know that? I don't know. You have to do that kind of stuff. So that's message box, okay? And then down here, I used my friend Pascal's name. I'm going to change this. And down here, we'll get to this in a minute. If comment question, I hope I put that. Is that what I called it? Comment question. So then it says, if that's number 6, then do something. Now, this is going to be the start of the, let's go to the next section, and I'm going to move. No, this is it. Okay, this is now an input box. And that's just where you want to collect data. Now, the problem with an input box here is that if I would not define these names, I'm going to put this somewhere else just a minute. If I would not define these start sheet and end sheet names, Excel will think it's a string variable. And what happens there is that, so let's say start sheet test equals start sheet plus end sheet. So this is just going through some, and I better put test 2 or something on that. And then I put message box test 2. So you can see how this kind of works. And then we'll put exit sub, so we don't have to see all the rest of the stuff. So let's say here's the first one. Do you want comments? Sure. Number of starting sheet 3, 6. And then I put that, and it says 3 plus 6. Is 3 plus 6 36? I didn't know if it has it, but it added strings together. Now, if I call these both things numbers, then when I put this together, it's let's put 3 and 6, and then it adds 3 and 6, and I think 3 and 6 is 9. So that's, you have to sometimes put those variables in, and that's an illustration of how to test things, kind of. And that's, I think, pretty important. Now, I want to talk about sheets, cells, sheets, and workbooks. Now, I tried to read something on VBA once, and I got through about 2 pages of it. But the only, and maybe I started skimming. The only useful thing is the person who wrote the book said, look, there is either a cell, a sheet, or a workbook. And you have to know, are you working with a cell or sheet or a workbook? Now, in this case, let's work with the sheet. And I want to delete that sheet. I want to take that circular references sheet that has a bunch of stuff in it and delete it. So here's what we have. Let's try this. I think this might have worked. Okay, let's say I only want to do sheet do. Oh, I said do again. Okay, I only want to work with sheet 4. Okay, so number of starting sheet 4, ending sheet 4. And sheet 4 is the, not this, it's called the second sheet. Okay, and then, bad, I gotta redo that. Okay, now, if I wanted to do it with sheet 5, I delete the whole thing and redo it. I'm almost deciding. I'm gonna keep working on this video. We'll fix the problem. Okay. I know what the problem is. Just a minute. So here's what you do. First of all, you say, okay, let's take and delete this sheet. So we work with the sheets. But it might be the case that that sheet doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, you'll get an error. Now, if you get an error, what I just did, by the way, is I put a little single quote there, a single inverted comma. And we didn't trap an error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this sheet for a minute. And then let's run this. Now, when you run this, okay, yes. Let's put sheet 5 to sheet 5. And then we get a debug error. Ooh, I hate it. Okay, but if we put on error resume next, that's called error trapping. And what you have there is, if you now do it, okay, 6 to go to 6, okay, it's going to go and find those circular references in sheet 6. It looks like we only had 3 of them. So it deleted the sheet and the whole thing kind of worked okay. All right, so that's called error trapping. And let's look at a couple of that code just a little bit. Okay, and again, I don't do anything fancy like all this other stuff up here. I just say, okay, all we need to do is work with the sheets. Okay, there was a little break in the video, obviously, and I'm gonna try to catch up where I left off. And the place I left off was with the, excuse me for this, was with the describing basics of an error checking. Now I have to get a little more advanced with that. Unfortunately, this stuff sometimes really sucks. Uh, what I did next is go around. I go around, but I'll come to this dimension in a little bit. But I go around sheets and I describe there's a sheet and a cell and a workbook. That's the key. If you really understand that kind of philosophy of things, you can go around the sheet and then select this sheet. This sheet is a variable, so it says from 1 to 6, for example, when we put it in. So the start sheet might be 1 and the end sheet might be 6. Just what we entered, and then it's going to go around each sheet. And I'm going to select each sheet. And then I'm going to put base sheet equals sheet, active sheet. Okay, did I spell it right? Name. And I don't know why in the heck. It just, here it's supposed to give me the little options after the dot, and why it didn't, God knows. Sorry about that. And then you can find that this should be, it's like the cells versus and then I can put select. Why in the heck I could do it there? And then I can clear all the comments, and let's see if that one might not work if I don't calculate the sheet. And then we go around, and then we go around the cells, and I'm going to go from row 1 to 20. Now, in the generic macros, I figure out what the maximum number of rows are, and this should be really an input or something else. In fact, no, I'm not going to waste your time with that. I could put up here, we could have, I'll leave that as something you can do. You could put start row, how many rows do you want to search for, and how many columns do you want to search for, and then you'd have to put that as a single. You'd have to define those two things as a single. I'm not going to bother. Okay, I should perhaps. And then we go around every single cell in every single sheet, basically, and we define this as, it's nice because you can find the formula, the address, the precedent, all sorts of things. So each cell has just like each worksheet has a name, each cell has an address, and some cells have a formula. And then I decided, okay, let's make a string and let's put a little thing. So when I find this formula, I want to be able to output this formula. And that's what I do down here. I say, here's the cell string and here's the sheet name. Okay? Okay, and then I say, well, okay, and this is kind of what the other guy did. Let's take each cell, and I don't think that's that hard. Let's take each cell and the formula, and if in the very leftmost we have a equal sign, then we know we could have a circular reference. Now, here's the problem. We want to see, okay, if this thing doesn't have a precedent, we want to go around. And what we would do is we would get an error. And I'm just going to describe this right now. So unlike the other error trapping, this is a little more painful. When you're going inside a loop and you want to trap an error, you have to go all the way out of the loop. Just a minute. I said go all the way out to where it says non-circular, and then you have to put it back at the end of the loop. God knows why. I hate this so much, this trapping in a loop. But you have to go all the way out of the loop. Now, if you just finish the loop normally, you go to exit sub. And I had some auto-fit things there. Okay, now let's continue. I don't know if I described this well, but you can look and copy it. Okay, so this thing that says go to, I didn't describe this yet. This is some sort of, what you call this. There's a name for it. I have no idea. I should have read one of those stupid VBA books, I suppose. But it just goes down to here. And I copied this from somewhere because I kept on doing it wrong. And then this resume is kind of the same sort of thing. We go up back to this one, and this is maybe a label. Maybe that's, I think it's called a label. Okay, and finally, we have the same sort of thing. Well, this is where I copied the whole business of if you have a cell address and that intersects with the precedent. See, it says dot precedence dot address, and it took me years to kind of figure out that you have to put first dot precedence and then dot address there. Okay, other people would have got it very soon. And then once we have this result, if it's not an error, if there's not an error on this intersect, then we found a circular reference, and we can count how many circular references we had. I'm not sure I've even used that count. Where did I start the count? Where did I put the count equals 0? I had to put it somewhere. Okay, I can't find it. Oh, here it is. So we're counting the whole number of circular references. I suppose we could put that at the very end here. We could, at the very, very end, we could put them. Oh, here's why I needed them. I needed them to say, duh. I needed to say, okay, let's, in this cells command, which I don't think I described well enough. This is horrible in a way, but I'm not giving up. I'm keeping going. This is the row, and this is the column. So I'm going to say in row number count of circular references. So that's going to start with, up here, it's going to start with the first time we found it. Now, what I do is maybe let's do something else. Instead of starting with count equals 0, let's start with count equals something like 4. So we put initialize a variable, initialize row number. Okay, that's what we're really doing for output. Okay, we'll finish that. And then I said, okay, let's put the address there. Let's put the string. Let's put the precedent cell. All of these things have been defined up here. We put the cell and the cells, I should say, you go to a row number and a column number. It's a beautiful thing, the cells function. I cannot believe doing any kind of much VBA without that kind of thing. Maybe, by the way, a user-defined function, you wouldn't use this. So that's a different story. And then once we have this row and the column number and we haven't found an error, which means, and this is really how it works, if we have not got the result, if we haven't got the intersection between the cell address and the precedent, meaning we haven't got a circular reference, the whole thing goes out of the loop and you've got an error trapping. I think I might put another video on about just error trapping a little bit later. And then we select that cell, and with the selection we can put some kind of color in. That's where I colored it. And in other situations, you could be all fancy and select the color and just put a different number in. You'd have to kind of experiment with a color. And then remember, we had a comment question that we used for the that I had put in with the message box. Do you remember this message box? We had a comment question, and we said if it's number 6, I put a little comment at the end here. If it's number 6, I'm using comment way too much. If it's number 6, okay, we then we'll then add a comment. And when we put the comment in, the way I found this, of course, in case with both this and this, is I made a little macro. I let Excel do all the work. It's kind of like the earlier macro with the goal seek. You let Excel do the work, and then you just copy it in. So what I had done is kind of switched on a macro stupidly. Okay, let's switch on a macro, call it macro 2, and let's go to put a some kind of color in there, and of course turn off the macro, and then go to the find this macro we just did, which was called macro 2. We edit it, and then we just copy it into this. So maybe I'm going to change the color. Why don't I make it yellow? If you don't like the yellow, you can go and practice and put your own color in. Okay, and I seem to have not found this. So now we'll put this in, and our circular references will be yellow. And this is exactly the same thing. I just added a comment, recorded the macro, and then found where you put the text in, and we said, okay, we have a circular reference. And this is the kind of introduction, and then this went way, and this is the address. That's kind of hokey. Address of reference. So that's fine, I guess. Okay, and then precedence. Well, we don't need all of that. Okay, and now, and then we finish up the loops with the for loops. This is really the second video, so you shouldn't. I hope in the discussion of data tables emphasized the for next loops. So we have to finish this loop and then this loop and finally the sheet loop. But it really does illustrate how you use kind of the two things. And we have next sheet here, next row, next column. This is where we go and continue the loop. And sometimes that's a pain. I should know it. And finally I said, okay, let's just kind of fit the outputs together. So let's run it one more time. Okay, I gotta fix that. But this program finds the circuit. Let's put the comments in since I changed that. And we've got sheet 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's go from sheet 3 to sheet 6. Okay, I don't know if you noticed I had to edit a little bit, but it gives you the sheet name, the cell address, the cell string, the cell address of the circular reference. Maybe I'll put that in there. The cell string for the circular reference, the cell formula, really. I should call this the cell formula, and the cell precedent. So let's finish this up and just fix this. So this is the cell address. This is the formula. And each time, if you notice, it's kind of like we have sheets and then cells. And I don't know why people do this kind of sheet destination dot offset. Why would you do that? It just makes things more complicated. It's not that, whatever. You just need to make a simple counter. My philosophy on this is just to have it kind of nice and simple. And then we put, it's not really the cell string, it's the, oh yeah, that's the cell string, and then the cell, I'll put circular, the cell address, and then the precedence and formula, and the sheet name of circular. Okay, that's okay. That's enough, I think. Okay, and let's do this now. I could put also, you could kind of put a little title on here, but if you put a little title, you'd have to do it outside the loop. You'd have to do it right here where I put the cell address. So I'm not wasting time on this. So let's one more time. Yes, we'll include the comments 3 to 6. Let's go around. It's just going to go the place, okay, to the sheet name, and then we have, here's our address, here's our formula, and here are the precedents in the formula. Okay, and when we did this, now it says here's the formula for the cell address, and it made them yellow and all of that stuff. Okay, I think that's enough of this stupid video, and I gotta stop it here.